So welcome to the Writing Effectively webinar. This is a presentation of the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training. My name is Tim, and I'll be your host for the webinar today. Our facilitator today will be Regina Robinson. At this point, everyone's microphone is muted, so there won't be any background noise. If you have any questions, you can click on the raised hand button at the bottom of the participants panel. It's an icon of a hand. Once you're called on, I'll unmute you, and you can speak using your phone or your computer. I'd like you to try raising your hand now. Once again, the raise hand button is at the bottom of the participants panel. If you go ahead and hit the hand, you'll notice that a little hand will go up next to your name. All right, and go ahead and click that hand again, and that'll put your hand down. You can also type any questions or comments you have in the chat box. Once again, the chat box is located at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Make sure that all participants are selected in the Send To area. When you finish typing, click the Send button, so you can ask questions in the chat box at any time during the class. Once again, as I mentioned previously, today's webinar is sponsored by the New York State and CSEA Partnership for Education and Training, or as many people refer to it, just the partnership. Some of you may be wondering, what is the partnership exactly? Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, the partnership is an organization that administers education and training programs for CSEA represented employees through labor management cooperation. It is funded through negotiated agreements between New York State and CSEA. The partnership offers in-person classroom training, online learning, educational advisement services, grants, tuition benefits, labor management services, and other education and training programs, including the webinar you're attending today. Partnership is a joint labor management organization whose mission is to promote career mobility, improve job skills, support workplace safety and health, and promote effective labor management relations. You can learn more about us on our website or by calling us directly. I'll provide our contact information again at the end of today's webinar. Now that we know a little bit more about the partnership, let's get started with the Writing Effectively webinar. I'd like to turn the presentation over to your facilitator, Regina.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, and I see some familiar names. Again, I'm Regina, and I've been teaching for the partnership for about 15 years, and most of my classes are writing classes. I also teach reading classes, and I teach focus on pronunciation. So welcome to today's webinar. Now, I was very, very happy to see some of the responses to the question, what have you had to do or practice to get better at? And I'll talk about some of those things in a minute. But I just want you to know that if I do my job, by the end of today's session, you'll be able to recognize why you have to write with your readers in mind, very important, identify basic methods of organization and organizational tools, and choose effective and appropriate vocabulary, and learn how to make your sentences clearer and more concise. Now, some of the things that you've mentioned in the chat that you had to get better with, you got better at over time with practice. Cooking, carpentry, listening is a good one. Some people are learning a new language. Typing, writing, public speaking, all of these things. Having a positive outlook, yeah, we have to practice that. Sewing and baking, okay. And taking minutes, meeting minutes. So all of these things are things that we get better with the more we do, and the same applies to writing, okay? Now, you will have some homework. It's a short homework assignment. And it'll give you a chance to practice your new skills. What you'll do is write a short document, and we'll talk about that more at the end of the session, including your deadlines and the instructions. So I also want to invite you as we go along, if you have a question, to just click the raise hand button. You've already practiced that, or you can type your question in the chat, all right? And we'll also have some time at the end of the webinar to ask any questions you may have. I'll hang around for a little bit after the webinar if you need me to answer some of your questions. So let's get started. Now, Throughout today's session, we'll be covering 5 main topics: getting started, getting organized, word choice, concise writing, and tools and resources. So let's begin by talking about the best way to get started when you write. Very important. The first question you should ask yourself even before you begin to write is, what do I know about my readers? And you want to know things like, what is their level of education? What is their reading level? And finding out this information, believe it or not, is your responsibility as the writer. For example, if you're writing a quick email to a coworker, you can use informal language, that's okay. But if you're writing a report to a department head, more formal language and tone is appropriate. Okay. Now, before we go on, I'd like to stop and ask you a question. What do you think is the average reading level of American adults?
So I'd like you to notice that I've opened the polling panel on the right-hand side of the screen. Take your mouse and click on the circle next to the option: A, 5th to 6th grade, B, 7th to 8th grade, C, 9th to 10th grade, or D, 11th to 12th grade that you feel is the correct answer. So A, B, C, or D on the poll panel there, and we'll give everybody a moment just to click. It just takes about 15 or so seconds for WebEx to close the poll, so we'll wait for that.
Okay. All right, I'm excited. I want to see what the answers are. So just choose A, B, C, or D, and they have to hit submit also, right, Tim?
Yeah, you should be seeing the responses right now.
Oh, now I see them. Okay. All right. Well, I have to tell you that 9 people got it correct. The correct answer is B, 7th to 8th grade. And to illustrate this point, the New York Times is written at a 10th grade level, and most people consider it to be too hard to read. So if you said C, you weren't too far off. On the other hand, romance novels or mysteries, they're usually written at a 5th grade level because that's more leisurely reading. But the correct answer in this case is B, 7th to 8th grade.
So before we move on, I'd like you to notice that when I open the polling panel, the chat and participants panel may have closed. To reopen them at the top right, find the participants icon and click on it to reopen it. Click on the chat item to do the same thing to reopen the chat box. If the participants panel isn't open, you won't be able to raise your hand. And if the chat panel isn't open, you won't be able to ask questions or share your ideas with us. So we'd like you to reopen them now.
Okay, great. All right, now let's get back to how well we know our readers. Another question you should ask yourself is, how familiar are my readers with my jargon? And most of you know jargon is a specialized vocabulary that is easily understandable to your coworkers, but might not be understandable to people outside your immediate work group. Jargon includes things like technical language and the sort of insider's vocabulary that develops in any organization. So now let's move on to the next question that we have for you. How much do my readers know about my topic? In other words, what can I assume people already know, and what do I need to explain? So different readers may have different levels of familiarity with your topic. Think about your coworker, the public, a department head, or a supervisor in a different agency. All of these individuals will have a different understanding of your topic and the context surrounding it. And again, it is your responsibility to know your reader. That way, you can craft a very effective message. Okay, so let's take another question. From time to time, our readers may have the wrong idea about something we are going to talk about. As writers, should we do anything differently when we know that's the case or not?
So if you feel a writer should write differently when their readers believe incorrect information, click on the green check bottom at the bottom of the participants panel for yes. If you feel the writer should write in the same way in either case, click on the red X in the same place. So the green check if you think they should write differently, or a red X if you think they should write the same. See what kind of responses we get.
Are we getting responses?
We are.
Okay.
And it's vast majority are green checks.
Green checks, okay. Let me go to participants, then I can see. Okay. Most are green checks. Yes, 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 yes. You guys are so smart. Thanks for sharing your ideas, and I agree with you. Yes, we should write differently in that case. But let's talk more about this idea. I believe we need to discover if our readers are likely to have any misconceptions or wrong ideas about our subject. If there are misconceptions or misunderstandings, or even just differences of opinion about your topic, you may need to address those issues up front. Because if you don't, you may find that your readers are less likely to accept the information that you are trying to share. Their misconception gets in the way of understanding your writing. It may be a good idea to acknowledge any common misconceptions early in your writing. You may need to provide more background information than you might normally to help persuade your audience to your way of thinking. Another thing you should ask is about your readers' level of interest in your topic. You know, like what's at stake for your readers? What do they care about? These are issues you should focus on. An example of this, maybe some of your readers want the big picture. Others need more details. You can reach both readers in the same document if you know the reader's interest levels. Finally, you should think about how your readers are likely to respond to your message. Obviously, you want your readers to be open to your message. You may also want them to do something in response to your message, like to take some action. You have to tell your readers what you want them to do. Should people provide you with information? Is there a deadline? I'm a deadline person. I always need to know when you want this back. So you have to tell your readers why you want them to respond as well. And people are more receptive when you give them a reason why you are making a request. Okay, especially adults. They want to know why you want this or why they have to do this. Now, your understanding of your readers will help guide you through the writing process. And that understanding will help you decide things like what kind of tone is appropriate. For example, how formal or informal should you be? You should also think about what you should include and what you should leave out. In other words, you need to figure out what's important to your readers and what isn't. You also need to think about what to emphasize, how to organize your writing, and finally, what kind of vocabulary you should use. This is all about keeping your reader in mind. Okay, so now that you know your reader, the other major question to ask yourself before you begin to write is, what's my purpose? What do I want to accomplish? Now, usually your purpose involves more than just giving people information. You might want your readers to take some action, change their behavior, maybe give you some information, or maybe you're writing to change their minds about something. You know, the question is very simply, why are you writing this document? So let's stop at this point and get your responses to another question. What is the basic purpose of the type of writing you generally do at work? Are you trying to get your readers to take some action, to change their behavior or minds, or are you just sending them information? And can you please type your answer in the chat box?
So please type the general purpose of the writing you do at work in the chat box. Once again, the chat panel can be found at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Make sure that all participants are selected in the Send to Area dropdown, and when you finish typing, click the Send button to share your idea with us. So please type the general purpose of the writing you do at work in the chat panel.
A lot of information, providing information, responding to requests, I see. A lot of information. Educate people, great. Letters to consumer, oh yes, you need to explain, oh, the reason for DPS decision. That's jargon. I don't know what that means, but that's something Denise has to send out. Provide information. Also request it. Yes, request. I need this now. Good. Depending on who I'm dealing with, it's a little mixed. Great. All right. Work orders. Yes, so you have to be very precise with those. To get the right answer, better communication. Good. All of those are great answers. Thank you so much. Now, before we move on, are there any questions about getting started? So you want to make sure you keep your reader in mind, okay?
So if you do have a question, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of the participants panel, or as in any time during the webinar, you can type a question in the chat box. I don't see any hands up, and we'll see if something comes in the chat, but we can move on.
Okay, let's move on. So we're going to move on to our next topic. In this section, we'll be talking about how you can organize your writing to make it easier to read. Now, a well-organized message is always easier for readers to follow and understand. And it also creates the impression that you have thought carefully about what you want to say. You know, you don't want to waste your reader's time with a message that rambles and goes off topic. We ain't got time for that. One effective way to organize your thoughts before you write is to start with an outline. And an outline serves several purposes. It helps you to organize your thoughts and to define your main ideas. It would also help you work out which ideas you want to include and which you should leave out. And once you know that, to decide what to say first, second, and third in your document. And finally, it can also help you overcome writer's block if you have a hard time getting started. So think of an outline as a tool to craft an effective message. Don't worry, your 8th grade English teacher isn't going to look at your outline and mark it up with a red pen. It's a tool for you. Now, before we move on, I'd like to talk about an elephant that may be in the room. I just told you that outlines are great, but I'd like you to raise your hand if you really don't like using outlines when you write, and you can be honest.
Once again, you can find that raise hand button at the bottom of the participants panel.
Okay.
Let's see how many hands we get.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, okay. All right, we have a few.
To 5.
Yeah, that's not too bad. Okay. All right, you outline haters. All right, we got to change that. Okay. I'm surprised that we didn't get more hands up, but that's good. But I'm happy to see that some people need to be convinced that outlines are good to use. A lot of people hate outlining, and I get it. It can feel like a lot of extra work when you'd rather just jump in and begin. But as I said, that can lead to rambling and going off topic. I think part of the problem is that most of us were only taught one way to create an outline, and there are lots of ways to create outlines. So if you may feel more comfortable with one style more than another, so you're not locked into one type of outline. Now, as I said, there are quite a few different types of outlines, and the type you probably learned in school is called a topical outline. The example you see here on the screen is a topical outline for a memo about replacing the security system in your office. Now, you can see that there are two main topics: problems with the current system and advantages of a new system. Okay, so those are the main topics, and subtopics are under each one. And thanks for highlighting that, Tim. Now, you can see that the subtopics or supporting details are under the appropriate topic. Now, this will result in a well-organized and persuasive memo or report. The topical outline is the most formal and structured type of outline, and it may also be the one that you don't like, but not in this case because of its formality, but it can't be beat for large, complex documents. I use outlines all the time. Now, a much simpler outline is called the scratch outline, and it's just a list of topics you want to make sure to cover. So if you really don't like doing outlines, maybe you should start with the scratch outline. Now, as you can see, the topics are arranged in no particular order, and there is no distinction between main topics and subtopics. And this type of outline works best for fairly simple subjects. This can also be a good style to use if you find yourself staring at a blank piece of paper or computer screen and you don't know where to start. The scratch outline helps you to get your ideas down. Then you can organize your topics and subtopics in a more topical style outline if you need to. And the next outline I'd like to talk to you about is free writing, which is probably my favorite. Free writing does not involve outlining at all, okay? At least not at first. It's a lot like brainstorming. You begin by writing the first thing that pops into your head, and you keep writing until you have said everything you want to say. Then you go back and organize what you have written. You may move things around, delete some things, add emphasis where you think it's appropriate. And this method can also be good for writer's block. It's good to time yourself, about 5 to 10 minutes or even less. Sometimes I just time myself for 3 minutes and start writing. And you just write whatever comes into your mind. And you know what? It's okay if you go off topic, and it's okay if the grammar and punctuation is not right. Don't worry about it. The idea is to just get something down on paper. Then you can go back and rework it into a topical or scratch outline. Okay, now that we have our outline, we need to decide on the organization of our document. And there are several ways you can organize your document. So, you know your reader, you know the purpose of your message, and your topic and subtopics. How do you decide what to say first, second, and third? How do you choose an effective method of organization? So we're going to look at 4 options: the inverted pyramid, chronological order, problem solution, and list. Now let's begin with the inverted pyramid method of organization. Now, one method that works well for a lot of people is called the inverted pyramid. In this approach, you begin with the big picture, using one sentence that sums up what you want your readers to know. Then you present additional information in order from the most important to the least important. Now we have another question. Why do you think news stories usually use the inverted pyramid method of organization?
So once again, we'd like you to use that chat box at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Let us know why you think the inverted pyramid of organization is usually used by news organizations. Make sure all participants are selected in the drop-down and click send when you are finished. So let us know why you think the inverted pyramid of organization is usually used by news organizations.
Okay, yes. Okay. Oh, drawing. Somebody starts drawing, then free writing. That's absolutely fine. Do it that way. To hook the readers, yes, yes. Clickbait, get people's attention, yes. Those are all good answers. Yes, you want to get the most important info to your reader or listener first, yes. Grab attention, right. Most people tune in at the beginning, yes. To make sure the overall picture is there for, yes, absolutely. Think of, and then outline free writing, right. Great, yes, you guys, excellent responses. Again, the basic idea behind the inverted pyramid is that the longer people read, the more their attention starts to fade. So that's why you want to get the important information out and on the paper at the top. This is something you should keep in mind when you write. It is also a good option for long documents or for documents that have a wide range of intended audience members. You know, readers can get the who, what, why, when, and where right at the beginning and only dig deeper for details if they need them. And it also makes your documents easier to scan, which is another tactic readers will use to find relevant information. The House have an attention span of about 12 minutes. Yeah, and I think that's long. Okay, here are some other logical methods of organization. Chronological order. This is just putting information in the order it occurred, and it's often used for incident reports or reports of investigations. Now, the problem solution method is useful for suggestions. You can do a better job of capturing your reader's attention if you begin with a statement about what's wrong and then present your idea for doing things differently. Sometimes the best way to arrange information is just a list. You know, for example, if you want to tell people about 5 new procedures for handling travel reimbursement, you could arrange the information in a list format, you know, with a sentence or two for each new procedure. And don't forget, it might be a good idea for you to also let your reader know why you have these new travel procedures, these new procedures for handling travel. Okay, so now that we talked about methods of organization, let's look at some organizational tools. All right, thank you, Tim. So organizational tools are just devices that help your readers follow your train of thought. We'll be looking at several of these tools: headings and subheadings, paragraphs, topic sentences, and transitions. But before we talk about headings, let me ask you another question. How many of you write documents that get to be 3 pages or longer? Could you raise your hand if you do, if you write documents that are 3 pages or longer?
So if you create documents longer than 3 pages, please click on the raise hand button at the bottom of the participants panel. So
Okay, looks like 3.
3?
Okay, good.
Up to 4?
4, we're up to 4, okay. All right, and if you're not doing this at work, creating those longer documents, keep this in mind if you decide to take an academic course when you'll be writing reports. This method of this organizational tool also works for academic writing. So, long documents are generally harder to read. Headings can help. They act as a sign to readers. They help readers identify main ideas and make it easier for readers to find what they're looking for. And they also break up the text. Most readers are put off by having to read long stretches of words with no white space or empty space on the page. So you can see on the screen that the headings on this page open up some welcome white space. This kind of white space is also useful because it helps to make our documents easier to scan. So that's the readability of the document. Another organizational tool is the paragraph. Paragraphs are units of thought, and a paragraph should be about a single idea. So when you start a new paragraph, you are signaling to your reader that you are moving on to a new topic. So let's talk about topic sentences next, which are usually the first sentence in a paragraph, but they can come at other places in a paragraph. But let's just talk about the ones that come at the beginning of a paragraph. So the topic sentence lets the reader know what to expect or what information is in the paragraph. Because remember, a paragraph is about a single topic. The topic sentence tells readers who are just going to skim what you have written. They can read the first sentence of the paragraph and then decide whether to continue reading or to move on to the next paragraph. And in the example on the screen, we see that the heading tells us that this document is about the Civil War. The subheading tells us that the first section is about its causes. The topic sentence tells us what information is in the paragraph, so we know if we want to read about the causes of the Civil War, we can find it easily. So those are organizational tools. So let's take another question. Do you think that most people read what is written carefully, or do they skim through the things that they read? So choose A if you think they read carefully, B if you think they are more likely to skim through what they read, or C if you aren't sure, which is okay. That's why we're here.
Please notice that I've opened the polling panel on the right-hand side of the screen. Take your mouse and click on the option A, yes, they read carefully, B, no, they skim, or C, that you're not sure, to the closest way that you feel. So click on A, B, or C there on the poll. We'll give a moment for everybody to answer.
Oh.
And there are the results.
Okay, I agree. I choose B too, and I'm guilty of that. I think many of us are pretty busy at work, and more often than we we try to save time by skimming through written documents. We're just looking for the information that is most important to us, which is natural. Even if some of our readers read carefully, when we write our documents as if they will be skimmed, we make it easier for our readers to grasp our message quickly and accurately. So let's go on to another organizational tool. Another organizational tool is the transition. And transitions, like headings, help lead people who are skimming our documents through our thought process. Transitions are special words or expressions that do the job of connecting ideas. They help the reader see what a new sentence has to do with the previous sentence, or what a new paragraph has to do with the previous paragraph. You know, they help the reader follow your train of thought. And transitions are expressions such as, for example, on the other hand, also, and however. So let's see how transitions can make your writing more effective. So take a minute to read the paragraph on this slide, and I'll read it once and then you can read it after. Using public transportation is an excellent way to conserve energy. Many people do not use public transportation because they feel it does not meet their needs. They might think that bus routes are too far from their home or workplace. There are many people who are willing to walk a few blocks to a bus stop to avoid the hassles of driving. So I'll give you a moment to reread it. Okay, now there is nothing grammatically incorrect about this paragraph, but I think there is a way to make this information easier to read and understand by using some transitions. All right, so now we have the same paragraph, but I want you to pay attention to the transitions in red. Using public transportation is an excellent way to conserve energy. However, many people do not use public transportation because they feel it does not meet their needs. For example, they might think that bus routes are too far from their home or workplace. Still, there are many people who are willing to walk a few blocks to a bus stop to avoid the hassles of driving. Okay, so if you want to read that to yourselves, I'll give you a moment. Okay, so the question is, do you think that the transitions here made the paragraph easier to read?
So if you think the paragraph is easier to read with the transitions, click on that raise hand button at the bottom of the participants panel.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. Yes, just a few simple words made the paragraph easier to read and follow. Great. Okay, some people said didn't answer. I don't know whether that means they don't think it made it easier to read, but I think it made it easier to read. And when you're writing, I hope you start using transitions, okay? The first word in red, if you look at the paragraph, lets people know that the next thing being said may contradict or go against what was said in the previous sentence. So the reader is prepared for this to happen. The words, for example, lets the reader know that an example of the point is being discussed is about to be given. And finally, the word still gives the idea, like however, that some surprising or contradictory information is about to be shared. All right, so try using them. If you're not using them in your writing, try using them and see what the effects are. Okay, so we see transitions all the time in good writing. And can you think of some other examples of transitions that you've seen or that you use?
So as you're thinking about examples of transitions, type them in the chat box and share them with the rest of the group. Once again, make sure all participants are selected in the Send To area and click Send to share your thoughts.
But also, yes. Okay, although, yes. As a matter of fact, okay, I guess you can use that as a transition, sure. Moreover, yes. In addition to, fortunately, yes. But although, furthermore, also, yes. Yeah, you can use surprisingly, nonetheless, therefore, any phrase or word that tells your reader, I'm continuing my thought, I'm going to give you some contradictory information, I'm giving you an example, this is the result, aforementioned, right, as a result. And you can also do things like, in conclusion, absolutely, let your reader know you're done, okay, because regarding might be, maybe. You can also use like first, next, or first, second, third, consequently, absolutely, good, accordingly, all good transitions, and I hope you're using these, okay. So before we go on to the next topic, are there any questions? Firstly, yes. Accordingly, okay. I got to move on. Before we go on to the next topic, are there any questions about getting organized? You guys have this.
So if you do have a question, go ahead and click that raise hand button. Otherwise, you can type your question in the text chat area.
As a result, yeah.
Naomi, did you have a question? Is your hand up from before? And there are no questions in the text chat.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next topic. And our next topic is, when starting the sentence, how do you start a grabber sentence? Ooh. Well, a lot of times people start with an example or an intro, a little story, or if you're writing about problem solution, you start with the problem. Those are ways you can grab people's attention. I hope that answers your question. Let's see, can you share a tip? Yeah, exactly. I would say start with an introductory sentence, or again, stories, little short stories grab people's attention. That's also a good way to get people hooked on you. Have you, yes, when you say, have you ever, right, if you ask a question, excellent, excellent, Lucille. Yep, that gets people thinking. Good. Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to our next topic, which is word choice. And thank you, Naomi, for that, and thank you, Lucille. Okay, so we're moving on to word choice, and we're going to talk about jargon. Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong page. Hold on. Thank you, Tim. The basic point. to keep in mind here is that you want to choose words that will present your message clearly and accurately. In general, it's better to use simple, everyday language rather than unusual words that some of your readers may not understand. You should say, instead of saying pertinent, say appropriate. Instead of facilitate, say make easier. And instead of endeavor, say attempt. Now, usually, everyday English words will do a better job. There are 171,000 words in the Oxford English Dictionary, so we can always find a word to express exactly what we want to communicate. Now, the trick is finding the right word, but please keep in mind that simple is best. Keep your audience in mind. And now let's discuss jargon. As we mentioned it earlier, jargon is the sort of specialized vocabulary that people use when speaking with their coworkers. But the problem with jargon is that people outside your immediate work group may not understand it. And jargon includes technical terms, bureaucratic terms such as the names of forms and procedures, and all those acronyms that people use without considering whether their readers will understand them. And since you work for New York State, you are well aware of the many terms of jargon that you use every day. So I'd like you, this is a fun exercise, I'd like you to think of an example of jargon that people use in your agency.
So once again, we'll be using that chat box at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Please type an example of some jargon that is used at your agency or facility. Make sure all participants are selected in the drop-down before you click send.
And Lucille put in in the chat that when you use harder words, it makes the reader think, what are they trying to, yeah, you don't, sometimes, some documents are written so that you don't get the clear message, but that's on purpose. But we want to write so that people understand our message. Okay, utilize. STF, yeah. Telnet, vacate, yeah. DPA2, what the heck is that? MMS, ARI. Jetter drive, huh? Use your PC card to pay. CLMT, what the heck? HX, HM, yeah, there are lots of abbreviations, lots and lots. I know. New York State is an alphabet soup of acronyms and initialisms. Yes. SFS, I know what that is, I think. And the other thing, FOIL, one thing you have to keep in mind, what is the meaning of an acronym or initialism at one agency could mean something completely different at another. Okay, great, excellent answers. And I'm not familiar with many of these. I am familiar, if SFS is State Financial Services, then I'm familiar with that, but I don't know any of these other acronyms. No, docs I know. Okay, great. All right, so another thing you should do, so we want to avoid jargon, or if we're using jargon, we want to make sure that we tell our readers what it means. And another thing we want to avoid are cliches. And these are tired old expressions that you've heard too many times. You know, things like tried and true, beyond the shadow of a doubt, or dead as a doornail. Now, people who use lots of cliches in their writing create the impression that they're not giving much thought to what they're saying. They're just using the first words that pop into their heads rather than trying to find the best words to convey the message. Now, we can get away with using cliches in casual conversation, but in business writing, we should avoid them. Another thing you should avoid are fad words and expressions that may be confusing to some readers. So the reason is that some people may not know exactly what you mean when you use expressions such as pushing the envelope or leaning in. And now these are called idioms, and they can be confusing to readers who speak English as a second or third language. You know, they might make sense to us, but fad words and idioms may confuse your readers. Okay, and Lucille says yes, they use IRS. which means right. And good, yes, the IRS, two, same initials but different meaning. Okay. Another thing to avoid are euphemisms. And euphemisms are expressions that are used to make something sound better than it is. And some examples are pre-owned vehicle instead of a used car, or downsizing instead of layoffs, or fatal events instead of deaths. Euphemisms, they can create a bad impression. They suggest you are using language in a dishonest way. However, they can be helpful when we want to handle a topic a bit more sensitively. One example would be using the phrase, he passed away, rather than saying he died. Okay, so avoid euphemisms, bad words, and cliches and jargon. Be careful with the jargon. So before we go on to the next topic, are there any questions about word choice?
So if you do have a question, go ahead and click that raise hand button. Or as always, throughout the webinar, you can type a question in the text chat area. Just wait a moment and see if we get any hands. And there are no hands, and if somebody types a question, we'll be quick to go to it.
Okay. All right, so we're ready to move on to our next topic, which is how clear, concise sentences can improve your writing. Now, one of the best ways to make your writing clearer is to use something called active voice. And in active voice, the subject is the person or thing doing something. For example, she ate the apple. It may not always be a physical action like eating or throwing something, but it does refer to something that is being done. For example, the bank approved my loan application. So the bank performed the action. In passive voice, the subject is receiving the action. And an example would be, the apple was eaten by her, or my loan application was approved by the bank. Passive sentences often have the by part of the sentence doing the action. Now, active voice is more direct and concise, and it's a simpler way to write, and it's often shorter. Now, there are times when you might want to use passive voice. Maybe the subject or actor in the sentence is unknown, or perhaps you are talking about a general truth. One of the reasons passive sentences have gotten a bad reputation is because they can also be used as a way to de-emphasize or actually hide who did the action. And an example of this is the sentence, mistakes were made. Well, who made the mistakes? It never actually says who made the mistake, okay? So generally, keep this in mind. If you make sure that the subject or the person is doing the action, your sentence will be in active voice. Very important. It takes a little, if you're not used to writing in active voice, it does take a little practice. So let's do a practice. On the screen is a sentence in passive voice. The new policy was supported by the manager. Now, what I'd like you to do is rearrange this sentence and put it in active voice.
So please type an active voice version of this sentence in the chat box, then click send.
Yes, yes, absolutely correct. Can you write a book using free writing? You can definitely get started with writing a book using free writing. Yes. Yes, the manager supported the manager, he or she, they're performing the action. Good. And see how much clearer and more concise and more energy that sentence has than the policy was supported by the manager. Great. I am happy with these answers. Okay, let's move on. Keep sentences short. Long sentences are boring and difficult to read. In fact, the length of sentences is one of the main things that determines the reading level of a document. The longer the sentences, the higher the reading level. And the higher the reading level, the harder it is to read. Now, of course, if you're working for a law department, you're writing long sentences. If you're in academics, you're writing long sentences, but that's appropriate for your audience. But in business writing, it's better to keep your sentences short. So, what can we do to help? If a sentence contains a list, break it out and format it as a list. Readers will be much more likely to pay attention to each item on the list. If a sentence contains 3 or 4 pieces of information, break it up and give each piece of information its own sentences. Yeah, long sentences can be confusing. Yes. Good. Now, another way to make your writing clear and concise is to eliminate unnecessary words. Those extra words can clutter up your writing and obscure your message. And as I always say when we get to this part of the webinar, most of us remember that we had to write papers that had to be 500 words or 300 words, so we had to add words. But that's not appropriate for business writing. So you need to be on the lookout for things like repetitive words that mean the same thing, like unexpected surprise instead of just surprise. Complicated ways of saying simple things like due to the fact, just say because, or filler words such as nature, in terms of, or for all intents and purposes. You can just skip some of those. You don't need to put those in. They don't help your reader understand your message better. You should also avoid redundant phrases or expressions. For example, you don't need to say past history. Why? Because all history is past. You don't need to say foreign imports. Why? Because all imports are foreign. If they weren't foreign, they wouldn't be imports. They'd be domestic. You don't need to say advance warning because guess what? A warning doesn't do much good if you don't give it in advance. And the same is true for advance planning. Okay, Thomas, I always hated writing in assignments that have specific. Yes, me too, right? Good. So eliminate those unnecessary words, right? And redundant expressions. So we're going to practice what we've just covered. On the screen is a sentence with some filler words. Type any words you think are unnecessary to the meaning of the sentence and put it in the chat box.
So please type any words that you think you could skip in the chat box. Click all participants from the drop-down and then click the send button. So what are words you think we could skip?
Entire, yep. Every type, yep. Type of, yes. You guys are fast. Every, Type, each, or right. Entire, each, and perform a type of, yes. Good answers. You guys are so fast. I love it. Okay, so I think we could get rid of the phrases each and every time and just say in each time. I also think we might be able to get rid of the word entire and just say network. And finally, we can also get rid of a type of and just say test. You guys did a very good job cutting unnecessary words. So this is what you do in your revision and your editing of your document. You go back and you just take those words out. Good. All right. So now that we've covered that, we're ready to go on to our last topic, which is tools and resources. And in this section, we'll take a quick look at some things that can make writing a little easier for you. First, let's talk about spelling checkers. Spelling checkers are wonderful tools. You should use them always. You should remember that although spelling checkers are no substitute for proofreading, a spelling checker won't tell you that you should have typed T-H-E-I-R when you type T-H-E-R-E. And I'm sure everybody's had that experience where you've written a document and there's no spelling, no spell checking that has to be done, no little squiggly red lines under your words, and you send it off, and then you reread it, and you realize you typed the wrong word. It's spelled correctly, but it's not the word you wanted. So please be careful when using spell checkers. Now, Microsoft Word has a built-in spelling checker, and there's a button for it on the Review tab. You can also have it check your document automatically by going to File, Options, and in that menu, choose Proofing. I love spell checker. Yes, read, yes. I know, read, reread, and then proofread. I know, right? You have to reread. And it's also a good idea if you don't have to send something out right away. What you can do is just put it in your drafts. Don't forget that it's there, because I've done that. Put it in your drafts and go back like an hour, half hour later and reread it and see if you're looking at it with fresh eyes. And I've done that a couple of times, and I'm glad I did, believe me, because I've been embarrassed enough with my errors not checking my emails. Okay, another tool is the grammar checker. Now, they can point out some obvious errors such as sentence fragments, which are incomplete sentences. But grammar checkers, just like spelling checkers, also have limitations. They miss some mistakes, and sometimes they tell you that grammatically correct sentences contain errors. And I've had that experience too. So there's no substitute for knowing grammar and punctuation. The grammar checker and the spelling checkers are tools to help you, but don't rely on them 100%. Yes, and Lucille says she also has a coworker read it. Yes, fresh eyes. And then Robert said he reads it out loud. Yes, absolutely, reading it out loud. Or if you have someone else read your document to you, that helps as well. And also Microsoft Word has a grammar checker, and you just go to File, Options, and then you from that menu you choose Proofing. And one good online grammar checker, and I think a lot of people know about this, is Grammarly. Okay. Now, if you're in doubt about the meaning or spelling of a word, remember we have 171,000 words in the Oxford English Dictionary. You should look it up. If you think there might be a better word than the one you've used, look up the word in a thesaurus, which is a dictionary of synonyms. Now, the reason why we want to keep our thesaurus and dictionary handy is because when you're looking for a synonym in a thesaurus, you might find a word and you say, wow, I love that word. I love the way it sounds. And you'll put it in the document, but it won't make sense because you didn't look it up. There are shades of meaning. For example, when you want to describe something that is pleasing to the eye, you can say it's attractive. Is that appropriate? You can say it's beautiful. You can say it's gorgeous. And you can say it's cute. But which one is accurate? So use the thesaurus, find a synonym, and then go back and look it up in the dictionary to make sure that word has the definition, the precise definition that you want. So I think of the thesaurus and dictionary as being married. Yes, brilliant is another way to describe something that's attractive. Okay? And another thing, not all agencies have these, but if your agency has a style guide, that can be very helpful. Agency style guides show you the preferred way to write about common topics. For example, a style guide might show you the preferred way to describe the individual that an agency serves. You know, are they clients, consumers, or patrons? And if you aren't sure if your agency has a style guide, you might want to ask your supervisor. And I recommend that. And if your agency doesn't have a style guide, one thing you can do is get your own. There's a Strunk and White. There's the AP style guide, the Modern Language Association, Colleges usually have their own style guides, and there are lots out there, and there are many that are actually online. I like the Blue Book of Grammar, which is a good one. I also like Grammar Girl, but and OWL, the online writing lab at Purdue University, and these are all free online services. Okay, so believe it or not, we're at the end of today's class. So the next step is up to you. As homework, I'd like you to send me a sample of something you have written at work or something you were working on right now. Just a paragraph or two. I don't want to have to go through a 3-page document, all right? Now, what I will do is give you some feedback on the document, looking at it based on the tips and that we learned today, okay? So I'll make some helpful comments, and then I'll send it back to you. Now, if you don't already have something to send, write something brief about a work-related topic, such as a suggestion to management, your career goals and how you plan to achieve them, what you consider to be the most important characteristics of an effective manager or supervisor. So I'll read those again. A suggestion to management, your career goals and how you plan to achieve them, or what you consider to be the most important characteristics of an effective manager or supervisor. Now, if you don't like any of those topics, you can come up with your own. Yes, it can be a made-up work situation. That's fine, no problem. What I'm looking at is how you organize your document, how you your word choice. Is it concise? And maybe you're going to put a heading. Okay, those are things that I'm going to look at. Okay, so please send me your writing sample 1 week from today, which is that the 24th? Yes. Is that Thanksgiving Eve? Is that Thanksgiving Eve? Yeah.
Yes.
Do we want to give them another, make it the 26th? Is that okay? That's a busy week, yeah. Tim, is it, what do you think?
11/26 is fine.
Okay, all right. So don't eat too much turkey on the 25th because you know you'll have an assignment ready due on the 26th. Okay, does that work for everyone? And here are some more ideas from our tech backup. Suggestions to management career goal. Okay, great. Thank you. You typed that out for me. Thank you. Okay, that works for everybody? Good. And I'll put my email address in the chat right now.
I just did.
Oh, thank you. Okay, everybody, you have it? Great. Okay. Now.
So just let me break in just for 1 second. I just want to mention to everybody, you should have received a description of the homework assignment with your other class handouts. It would be in your confirmation email from the partnership. It's important to note that you cannot print your certificate from SLIMS until your assignment is received and your attendance has been updated. You must submit your writing assignment to be marked completed for this class, so keep that in mind.
Yes, please make sure if you don't turn it in, and I get a list and I send that list back to Tim so he knows who turned in their assignment. Okay, so again, don't make it too long. We just want to see that you understand and you were able to grasp the learnings in this webinar. Okay, now to wrap things up, I'd like to go back to where we began. When you write anything at work, keep these 2 questions in mind. Who is my audience and what is my purpose? Now, focusing on your audience and your purpose is the first step in writing effectively. And I also want to add, if you'd like to learn more about this topic, of course, the partnership has a full day for in-person class called Grammar and Punctuation. And when we're able to get back into the classroom, hopefully you'll sign up for that. It's a wonderful class. And there's also a 1-hour webinar called Avoiding Common Punctuation and Grammar Mistakes. We just had that a couple of weeks ago, so I would imagine that the next time something like that will be offered will be next year. Is that correct, Tim? Is that scheduled for any other time?
Yeah, we don't have the spring schedule out yet, so I couldn't tell you explicitly, but I imagine it'll probably be offered sometime next semester.
Yeah, just keep an eye out for that. Okay.